Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Esoterica. I'm Leah Eichler, and I'm here with Susan Caddo. Hey, Sue.
Hi, Leah.
How are you?
I am great.
So today we have an action-packed lineup of things we'd like to discuss. And the first and foremost is, and this comes on the heels of a conversation we had either last week or a couple of weeks ago about banned books, and I mean, we took some delight in poking fun at the banned books, but I think one of the elements of the banned book conversation that maybe we were remiss in covering is that books are banned. Not for us. We don't want to ban books, but language has a dangerous side to it, and language can have a dangerous component, right?
Yes, I mean that's where hate speech comes in, and we've all seen the ramifications of that.
Yes, we have. So there has been a lot of, really almost, don't want to call it shocking, because it really, nothing should really shock us anymore. But there has been some surprising hate speech this week. It started off about a week ago with we're naturally talking about Kanye, or Ye, or however he goes by now. We'll start off with a fashion show at Paris Fashion Week, where he headlined some T-shirts that said, something very inflammatory on them that were designated as hate speech for saying white lives matter. And he doubled down on it and insisted it was art, which I don't know. I mean, it struck me as weird. And you have to be very careful, especially as an artist who's as influential as Kanye is as an artist, proclaiming that hate speech is art, right?
Yeah, it's a bit like when Donald Trump's wife wore the jacket that said, "I really don't care, do you?"
Oh
when
my
she was
God.
going to meet like children that had been taken from their parents and put in cages.
Oh my
So
goodness, that's exactly right. Thank you for bringing up that analogy, because that was, that couldn't, I think she said that she was mocking the media, but I mean, the truth is it was also very hurtful. I mean,
mhm.
we're talking about people's lives are at stake. And here's where, people always say, well, where's freedom of speech? And where's that line between freedom of speech and hate speech? Well, that line gets drawn when people are incited to violence. And this
Mhm.
is inciting people to violence. This is saying that people's lives don't matter. There's really no other way as an artist. You have a PhD in literature, so you've analyzed a lot of words in your life. There's no other way to there's no way to qualify that as art, correct?
Well, I think that in this case, you can't make a case that this is art, and I think that the vast majority of the kind of sentient world is saying this is not art. This is,
Right.
this is hostility, and I think there's actually not a ton of defenders
No,
of
no, I
Kanye
don't
West
think
out
there's
there.
any defenders. I think
And,
the issue is
yeah,
when people are wronged, like, and this is, and I hate to say it, but it's quite often when men are wronged, they kind of double down and kind of take it to the next level of being wronged. So, Kanye was, I'm sure everyone knows the story already because it's been plastered in the media, but Kanye took the backlash that other rappers, other musicians had given him about the t-shirt, and somehow invoked this DEFCON 3 of the Jews, which is bizarre. Bizarre to be kind. Let's say it's bizarre, and just violently anti-Semitic, to be more accurate.
it's hard to imagine what he was thinking. Like, well, obviously, maybe not thinking, but I think the thing is with freedom of speech, no one says you have to be free from the consequences. So in Kanye's case, the
Right.
consequences came. You're kicked off Twitter. Um, people are going to be distancing themselves from you and from your product line. It might cost you financially. So yeah, no one's saying that there
I'm
shouldn't
actually,
be freedom from consequences either.
this is where I find it interesting, because it's almost as if, and remember we saw this with Donald Trump when Donald Trump was, given a timeout on Twitter.
Mm.
Um, is that really a punishment? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if someone tells you, oh, you're not allowed to tweet for a week because you incited your millions of followers to go DEFCON 3 on the Jews. Like, is that really, does he, I just think, I mean, obviously he's quite perturbed about this, and Elon Musk, who knows what conversation they had about it, because he wants to make the platform, once he acquires it, more, I suppose, friendly for any kind of speech, in the name of free speech. So I don't know. I feel like I worry, and we can discuss this in a few weeks. I worry that this is going to just blow over. He will be back on Twitter. He will make some sort of ramshackle, not apology, but maybe acknowledgement. I say he's going to say something like, I spoke to some friends or a rabbi or someone of note, and I am going to try and do better. That is my guess. I could be wrong.
And meanwhile, there'll be all the people that read what he said and think of it now as a reason that they can say the same or do the same. And, it's no exaggeration. Like it really does happen. I know after Trump was elected and started really saying very awful things about a lot of people, the reports of schoolyard bullying and stuff related to that really did go up. So, and I mean, as anyone, I have relatives who are devotees of Fox News, and I have seen, and before Fox News, it was Rush Limbaugh. You can't tell me that words don't have any power to change the way people act and the way they believe, because even when the words are absolutely absurd and stupid, which they really seem to be, there's people that are going to take them on board and repeat them and run with that.
That's very true. Okay, well, maybe we've given
Kanye enough air.
But we want to touch on it because we are in the business of words, and words matter, right?
Words matter.
Words matter.
So on a much lighter note, so do vampires. There's been a lot of ink spilled recently about vampires due to the resurgence of vampires in popular culture through a number of television shows, most notably Interview with the Vampire.
Interview with the Vampire. Why did I always think it was Interview with a Vampire? But it's Interview with the Vampire, yes?
Yes, and then another television remake of Let the Right One In, which was a fantastic Swedish movie that was also remade in North America.
Right.
And there's a third show as well, which I don't know if it's come to Canada, but apparently it's a bit of a spoofy one. So I mean, this comes to mind. The thing is, everyone involved with Interview with the Vampire talks so much about the novel and how it really is a touchstone for this. But it's interesting to me because you'd be like, well, that novel is like 30 years old. But obviously, the other show, by the way, is Reginald the Vampire, and it's a bit of a satire. Wow. I don't know if you've watched another vampire satire, What We Do in the Shadows, but so yeah.
I love that satire. That's hilarious. I actually love that one.
Yes.
That is very funny. Yeah, vampires are, I don't think vampires have always been very popular. I don't think they've ever really stopped being popular. But I guess it goes in waves where they surge in popularity. I mean, I still love Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like I was actually, I love the movie. I loved it.
I love the book. It's really, really good. And you can actually get a audio version. I'm looking at it now because it's on my phone. That is, and I think it has like a great reader. Oh yeah, it's read by Alan Cumming. That's what I wanted to say. Okay. Like, if you want to experience the book of Dracula, it's written by Alan Cumming. There's also a Twitter account that tweets what happens in Dracula in chronological order, like based on what day it is in the year, what was happening in the course of the novel Dracula. That's a lot of fun.
That's also very cool. So, I mean, let's talk about why vampires. What is it about vampires that, why do people love vampires?
If you look at the discourse around Interview with a Vampire, it's the sexiness. It's always comes back to vampires are really sexy. And in the case of Interview with a Vampire, it's people being really intrigued by the sort of the gay sex themes that they see in the Anne Rice novel and wanting to see those amplified in modern, television renditions of the book. But just always, even if you go back to Dracula, it's this irresistible force of sexuality.
Vampires are hot and they will. And there's no one stopping that passion. And I think that's the allure, is like there's so much passion that you almost have to succumb to it. And I mean, And of course, there is the appeal of the homoerotic aspects of it, which I think there's been some interesting controversy, or at least language about the new Anne Rice reboot, where they just double down on the homoeroticism in the book, which is probably the right decision in our day and age. I mean, 30 years ago, maybe it was safer to just talk about it around the periphery without actually doubling down. But now it's like, may as well. And the market is there and the audience is there. So the eroticism, the sexuality, I mean, it's like women love the sexuality as well. I mean, it's not just, a homoerotic thing.
No,
right?
but the most famous vampires are always men. Like, that's all. I'm curious to see what the TV show Interview with the Vampire does with the female character, especially because she is like a preteen girl.
Correct.
You can't really ramp up the sexuality on that without coming across fairly badly. So, and that's something that's addressed in the book for sure. The character is frustrated to be trapped in the body of a prepubescent girl.
You know what? I completely forgot about that. You're absolutely right. That'll be really interesting to see how that works, how they play that out.
Yeah, everyone should go back and reread Interview with the Vampire and then watch the show, which so far I have found quite gripping.
So, I mean, the other aspects I think of vampire culture that are really appealing to people is that so there's a sexuality, and then there's the appeal of this kind of anti-Christianity movement. It's like there is kind of a code that is outside of faith or traditional monotheistic religions that people find appealing and also dangerous and appealing all at the same time.
Well, you're first looking at immortality. So as soon as you have immortality, you're upending the whole concept of life after death and living now so that you can have, go to heaven or go to hell or whatever. That's all thrown out because you're immortal. So that's a start.
I mean, immortality is pretty intriguing as a literary concept as well, right?
Yes.
And now what else is there? There's
Everlasting was a book that a lot of kids read when I was young that deals with immortality. I think it's a fantastic literary theme, and usually it's always presented as something people regret choosing or regret having. So
right. I don't know. Would you regret it?
Well, I don't know, but then I say this not having read the Twilight books or really watched the Twilight series. But the thing I love about it is when people are like, so if you had the choice, would you be in high school if you were 200, 300 years old? Would you just spend your time in high school? Like, why would you do that? But, all the power, all the money, all the good looks in the world, and you're going to high school.
Yeah, okay, maybe that's a stretch. I mean, if you're 200 but look like you're 20, would you be in high school? Maybe you'd find other things to do. I mean, that are not high school related, but yeah. And there's the immortality. And then there's I guess there's also the occult, the fascination with the occult, which, I mean, in Esoterica's, imagery, we actually tease out the occult too. And, we find that very fascinating, right?
Yes. And go see some stories. And there's stories coming up too around Halloween that are going to upend a lot of ideas too. There's some really great horror coming your way. So
that's right. We have some really strong Halloween stories coming up. That's very true. So stay tuned. We have like another 20 days and they will be released. So if you have any other Halloween stories that you want to pitch us, now is the time to do it. Now is when people pitch the horror element of those stories. That this is like the peak time, just like people pitch Christmassy stories around Christmas time. But yes, this is the time for the occult. So I think now that would be actually a really great time to send us your work.
Yes.
Maybe we should just take a little break before we get to the next topic and remind people that our short story contest is still on. So people can send us their short story submission. Some people don't have a submittable account as they've asked what the guidelines are. We would like you to keep the story around 3,000 words, ideally under. If it's over a little bit, that's still okay, but try and keep it under 3,000 words. We are looking for stories that make us think, stories that we ponder for days. And Susan and I have discussed this before, but right, Susan, the stories that have a beginning, middle, and ending are always really, really nice. I know I feel like we say that a lot, but beginning, middle, ending, please. And I don't know, what else are we looking for?
Well, it's not part of the short story contest, but big idea pieces are
Big
also something
idea
we would love to
pieces,
see.
that's right. So, I mean, very
Yeah.
thought-provoking pieces of what's going on in the world, and
They don't
you're
have to be entirely serious.
they do.
They can be on subjects that are just making you think maybe, or making you laugh, but also making you think.
Yeah, those are excellent, excellent points. And so when now you just said we don't have to be serious, which is true. So you and I both came across a tweet that got thousands of likes and views, and it has since been deleted, which is very bizarre. But it said that, well, I mean, you came across the tweet first. What did it
Yeah, I
say?
can read it. Yeah. Oh, it says, I don't know who needs to hear this, but reading's not that deep. It's a hobby, and not everyone critically thinks about every book. Some people just bias their opinions on whether they vibed with it or not, and that's totally okay. And this really, like, this went viral, this tweet, which is interesting.
Right.
People really reacting. I thought most of the responses I saw, and when I went back to look again today, obviously, as you mentioned, it's deleted, so I can't really see, but people really didn't love someone saying reading's not that deep.
Right. Which is, I mean, a weird thing to get upset about. I mean, of course, there's a lot of deep and thought-provoking literature, but there's also a lot of really fluffy pieces that are very enjoyable to just pass the time. I mean, very much like there used to be, I don't know, when we were growing up, I'm just going to age us, but remember there was that divide like, oh, like there's like reading is smart and TV is not, right? And now
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
completely been changed because TV, obviously, and all the like fabulous like shows and documentaries can be very provoking, thought provoking, and very artistic. And it was artistic back then too, but there was a bias against visual representation of the story versus written representation of a story. But
Yeah.
I mean, like, well, I mean, what do you think? Do you have any guilty reading pleasures? You don't
No,
have
I
guilty.
firmly believe that there should be no guilty reading pleasures. And I
Okay,
also think it's a moving target.
right.
Back when people started writing novels, the others would say, why do you need novels are cheap and cheap reading? All we really need is the Bible. Why do you need to read anything but the Bible? And then, it just goes on from there. Or why do you need to go to the theater? And, you should just be reading the Bible. And then,
Would be really interesting people.
yeah, why do you need to watch TV? You should just be reading novels. Why are you playing video games? Like the whole thing. There's always going to be this. It's a bit like people saying, what's wrong with kids today? Like,
Yeah,
it's
it's
always
very
been with us.
true. What is wrong with ours? We won't go there. But yeah, that's actually really true. I mean, there can be books, and sometimes you read a book and you just think, okay, that was okay. Like that was
Yeah.
okay. I don't
Sometimes
really
I
have
get mad if my time has been wasted. So that's when I would be like,
there.
it is a hobby, but
Mhm.
I get kind of angry when books waste my time.
Right.
Like usually that happens with some of the popular books. I'm thinking of gosh, I'm thinking of books by the person who wrote Big Little Lies that I've read.
Right.
Two of her books where I've been furious by the end that I have wasted my time on this book because the endings are so lazy and
Interesting.
said, yeah. If you ask me, I would rather just watch the TV show Big Little Lies because that actually sets up a beginning, middle, end.
And it's only like a 30-minute episode or something like that.
It's fine. It's fun to watch.
So here's an interesting question. I people talk about this a lot. How many pages into a story or into a book will you give it before you give up? Or do you give up ever?
I've been told I don't give up on the books,
I don't
and
think
I'll
you
just
give up.
complain my way through it
Yeah,
until I get to the
I
end.
think that's fair. I don't think you give up. I think maybe that's your problem. You don't give up on books.
That's my problem. I really should start quitting books.
I
What
quit
about
books
you?
pretty quickly, and I didn't used to. I used to really try and like get through thinking it's just me. If I read another 30, 40, 50 pages, I will get into it. And I used to really much be like that. COVID has really changed my reading habits. I feel like my time is very precious. And
Mhm,
and
mhm,
also my attention span is a lot shorter, which is not a great thing, but it's just the way it is at this moment in time. So
mhm.
I think I give up a lot faster. Like I'm not going to give up maybe for good, but I will try and read 20 pages. If I can't get into the story, I will put it back beside my bed. I may
Yeah.
pick it up again in a few months when I feel like getting back into it, but I will move on to another book and see if another book really pulls me in right away. Uh,
Yes, and then if
and
you do
then
get pulled in, that other book just kinda goes by the wayside.
Exactly. So I think, I don't give it. A friend of mine who's chatting with me yesterday said she gives it 50 pages. 50 pages is a serious commitment. By 50 pages, most books are about 300, 350. I don't
Mhm.
know, 50 pages in, I think I'd probably finish it already because I feel like I've given it enough of my time.
Yeah. I
But
can't finish a bad audiobook because when I'm reading, I can sort of skim, but in an audiobook, they're saying every word. So sometimes I will speed up the book
right,
to see if that helps. And if that doesn't help, then
then
it's
it's done.
abandoned. But
It's
sometimes I will go back. You know, War and Peace, I tried reading when I was like a university student,
Yep.
could not get into it. All those names, I just couldn't make heads or tails of it. I tried again later, couldn't do it. I tried a couple summers ago on a Kindle, and this time it kind of stuck. But
Huh.
even so, I just kind of started to think like these war parts are very boring. So I kind of read the and peace part.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like all the relationships and love stories, I got those down. But don't ask me what happens in all the battle scenes.
Right,
'Cause I think I probably still read like hundreds of pages of battle scenes, but I didn't read like 500 pages of battle scenes, which is what the book seems to include.
right.
But my life was very much enriched by reading the book. So
Okay, well, there you go. So that's that. So that's interesting. You're talking about books you reread. So that will segue
yes,
to our final topic for the day, which is rereading, the reread. We want to call it the reread,
the
correct?
reread. Yeah, I think we'd love to do a regular thing where we talk about what it means to reread a book that you read years ago. And often this might have been a book you were assigned in school
Yeah,
that you wouldn't have necessarily chosen. Maybe you hated it. What's it like to reread it later in life? Or conversely, it could be a book you love. You often hear about people saying, I loved this book. And then, like an example is like, oh, I love the Little House on the Prairie books when I was little. And then you go back and you're like, and these books are incredibly racist. Like there's
right,
stuff that
right.
pops out at you
Yeah.
as an adult that maybe you didn't notice when you were a kid. But yeah, the reread for me, the number one book on my reread list is Rabbit Run by John Updike, because I read it when I was like a angry university,
Mhm.
student feminist, and still am feminist and angry, but I'm willing also like I couldn't. I think I remember at the time not being able to see any subtlety in it. I just seemed
Right.
saw it as embracing the point of view of the hero. I mean, it
Mhm.
just looked like it's a 26-year-old guy who's married with a kid who decides he can't handle it. And
Right.
now I'm like, oh, okay, maybe as an
There's
older
merit.
person who maybe relate to that a little more. I'm very curious to see how I feel about that book.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I haven't reread a lot of books. I was really inspired to reread 1984 in over the last several months. I don't know. There's so much in our
Why?
so much going on right now that made me think, are we really living in 1984? Because it seems like
Mhm.
language is well, it seems like we're really struggling with what the meaning of language and totalitarian societies. And I really thought, okay, I'm going to reread it and see. So, what? Interesting. It didn't have as much. And I probably read it the first time when I was in high school. So many, many years ago. Um, it probably didn't have as much. I remember having more of just discussion on the value of language, but I think that was my interpretation of it. Like I wanted
Mhm.
to really dig deep. Like I almost wanted there to be an like this is newspeak and this is how it works. And there was some, there was a character that is constantly rewriting the dictionary. So there was interesting aspects like that. But it was I'm just thinking if it was written today, I think there would have been more it's gonna sound bizarre because I love the book and I'd still loved it again. But I think there should have been more world building. We want to live in that world and see what it's like because we are kind of living in a world that's not that far from it sometimes. But what I mentioned, I know you and I discussed this earlier, which shocked me, which I think wouldn't happen today, is the sex scenes in 1984 were very disturbing
Mhm.
for me. Now, there was a very fun kind of moment where the characters before they have sex talk about it, and the female character says that she's slept with so many people, and he finds that super hot. Okay, which is kind of fun. I actually laughed at that because obviously it's bucking convention at the time, and that he thought
Yeah.
that was sexy. Um, but he did kind of insinuate that the first time he saw her he was so angry with her because he thought she was a party devotee that he wanted to rape her, which really kind of took me aback. And you wanted to see, because obviously, 1994 talks a lot about the disintegration of the family, just the disintegration of like couples and structure. Uh, you wanted to. I think I wanted to see more chemistry, like
Mm.
what happens. I mean, it's really hard to kill chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I want to see not just the, oh, well, we're just willing participants in the act of sex, which they were. So there was no obviously rape scenes, but you know, I think nowadays you'd want to see like they were compelled to break the laws because there was so much strong chemistry that they were
Mm-hmm.
kindred spirits. Maybe that's me. Maybe it's me being romantic. So yeah, 1984, I do recommend a reread. I would say it is a thumbs up. We were doing thumbs up and thumbs down as a reread. But I think if it were written today, let's call it 2024, I don't know, it would be a bit of a different book.
Yeah.
So the other book, and I don't want to, if you want to talk about a book, we talk about the other book, which I did read over the last year to my daughter, was Little Women, and I really hate to disappoint all the Little Women devotees out there, but it was really boring. I'm sorry. We got about 130 pages in, and this version has 400 pages, the way that the pages are laid out. And 130 pages in, there was almost no plot. And I'm sorry, you would never have a book today that has no plot for 130 pages, right?
Mm-hmm. Especially not one that's aimed at a young reader.
Well, can you imagine asking a 14-year-old kid right now, or a 12-year-old kid to read a 400-page book where nothing happens for the first 100 pages?
No, it just really would not happen there. I know my daughter's had that book given to her by like several different people, and she has great intentions to read it. She's like the movie. I have not seen her like reading the book.
Yeah, so that was the disappointing part. Yeah, I'm so sorry, people who love the book. I mean, I love the idea of the book, if that helps. I really do. I just could not finish it. So I did. I gave it, in that case, I gave it 130 pages, and then I put it away.
I'm going to follow your example and start putting down books that I am not thrilled by because life is too short.
Life is too short. Yes. Do not do it. Do not do it.
There are always other books to read. And also maybe I'm going to I'll try rereading new books instead of doing what I normally do, which is just reread Jane Austen books. I should really branch out in my rereading.
No, well, that's what makes you you.
It's my comfort read.
It's your comfort read, and that's okay. And Jane Austen, is great. Yes, I said she's great. She's great. Okay, great. So I think that wraps up our topics for today. So next week we will tackle another reread, and we will see what else is happening in the news. And again, don't forget to send us your stories, fiction and nonfiction, big ideas, or short fiction ideas. And we look forward to reading your words. And remember, reading doesn't have to be serious, but it really can be. So we'll flip a coin on that one. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Sue. And we will be here again next Tuesday. Bye, everybody.